Hey, hi everyone. I hope you're doing good. And in this video, we can talk about how you can enable the audit trail and how you can check the audit trail as per the Rule 11G requirement in SAP Hana Database. Now, if you have watched my earlier videos, we have covered the Microsoft SQL Server, the Oracle databases, as well as the IBM DB2 database. This time, in this video, we are going to cover the SAP Hana database. Now, this database you can access either through two ways. One is official the SAP HANA Database Studio, which is a GUI window, or you can also access the database via from the SAP front-end applications via Tico DB Cockpit. So let's just jump into it. I tried to get the SAP HANA Database access but couldn't, so I have kind of prepared a work program which has the relevant screenshot and sample output that will help us to understand how you as an auditor can check the auditor as per the Rule 11G requirement in SAP HANA Database. Now, in total, there are two kind of types of the databases we can say in specifically in SAP HANA Database. First one is the system database and the second one is the tenant database. Now, there is a difference between the system database as well as the tenant database. Now, system databases, as the word says, system is morely used for the system administration, while the tenant database is something which we need to take into consideration for auditor testing because it has the customer data, it has the SAP data, and there is a one-to-many relationship. So one system database can have multiple, one or more tenant databases. So the first thing is we need to take into considerations only the tenant databases, not the system databases. Now, in SAP HANA Database Studio, there is something called as a layered configuration. So the values, the files, the keys, this can be set up at 4 levels. First one is the host level, second one is the database level, third one is the system level, and fourth one is a default level. As you can see in this text box, there is a priority. So whatever the value you keep it on a host, it has the most priority, then the database, then the system, and it's a default. This is just for the informational purpose, not something which we will be using for the audit trail testing. Now let's just jump into the audit trail testing. What are the queries, what are the things we need to take into consideration? So I have divided it into 5 to 6 steps. Now, before we start, if you have seen my earlier videos in terms of Oracle databases, IBM DB2 and the Microsoft SQL, it is always a two-step model when it comes to the audit trail, right? First one is there is a toggle or there is a global parameter which we need to turn on, and the second one is the audit policy which we need to activate. A combination. So in this two condition there is a and. So only when the step 1 as well as the step 2 is completed, then only the audit trail will be enabled and the logs will get captured. Similar to this two-step model, SAP HANA also follows the same. First one is the global auditing parameter. So there are multiple ways to go into this. So if you have a SAP HANA Database Studio, the path is you need to go to the tenant database, then the security tab, again security tab, and in the auditing tab. As you can see from this, let me just zoom it a little bit. Yeah, so this is the tenant databases, then security tab, and then again security tab. You can see in the auditing tab, you can see the global auditing. Now this is a global parameter or a auditing toggle which needs to be enabled. So this is a step 1, right? You can kind of get the similar information through these queries. So if you want to query the databases either through DBA Cockpit, T-Code, or directly from the SQL window browser, you can run these two queries, you will get the similar output. Now that's the first step. Now besides this, there is a very important parameter which says that's the auditor target. As the word suggests, target, it kind of defines the storage where the auditor will be stored. Now there are 3 options which I have mentioned which one can set the auditor target. When it comes to tenant databases, the by default option is the database. So audit logs will be stored in a database table. The table is audit_log, right? But let's say I don't want to store it in a database, right? I want to store it somewhere else, right? Now there are 2 options. One is a CSV text file where the audit logs will be stored in a .csv files, and as you can see in this screenshot, we can see it has been set to CSV text file, and then it will ask me the directory where the CSV text file will be stored. So that can be also done. And there is another option, syslogs. So if you are aware of the Oracle database, Oracle also kind of gives the DB extended and then OS. So similar to Oracle database, syslogs also store the audit logs at a OS level. just note that SAP HANA Database Studio only support the Linux OS, be it SUSE or Red Hat, but not the Windows. So in syslogs, the audit logs will be stored in a OS. Now, this is a very important auditor target parameter because, as I mentioned earlier, there are two ways you can access the database, either through SAP HANA Database Studio or a DBA Cockpit. Now, whenever you try to do the testing via DBA Cockpit T code, right? If the auditor target is set to probably a CSV or a syslog, if you try to query the audit underscore log table, it will be always be empty because audit logs are not supposed to be sitting in a database table. They are configured to sit in a probably a CSV or OS. So if you are doing a testing via DBA Cockpit, it is very imperative that you first check the auditor target. If it is set to database, then only you can do the testing from the SAP frontend application. If it's set to CSV and OS, then you need to connect with the DBA team and find out the OS path where the audit logs are stored and perform the testing accordingly. So that's the step one. Now you will ask me, this is, let's say for example, in your case, the client has enabled during the audit period, or you need to also report on one of the parameter which is tampering of the audit trail, right? So in such scenarios, how we can check whether this the auditing status has not been disabled during the audit period or the date on which it has been enabled. So one good thing about SAP HANA, database is whatever the keys, this auditing status we call it as a key, right, or the parameter, those are stored in a file. It always keep a change log, so the old value and new value is available. So the step 2, where we can run this query and we can get the change history of the global auditing state parameter, so we can identify whether it was disabled during the audit period or also the date on which it has been enabled. So I've given this screenshot, and if you scroll down, there is a sample output. As you can see here, this is the date, this is the timestamp, this is the key, which is a global auditing state. The previous value is the old value and this value is the new value. So from here you can get an idea when it was disabled or when it was enabled during your audit period, right? Now this was more on the step 1 or the global auditing parameter. Now the next step is very important because this just enabling the global audit parameter will not enable the audit logs. You need to tell the database which tables you want to audit, which users you want to audit, which kind of successful commands or unsuccessful commands you want to audit, or both. So for that you need to create obviously the audit policy in the database. Now if you just go to the first screen, you can see here the audit policies, right? So from here only you can get an idea that what kind of audit policies which are there. So I will just scroll because there is specific screenshot. Yeah. So from this you can get a high level idea, whether there are audit policy created or not. So if this section is blank, that means the audit policies are not created, and since the audit policies are not created, SAP HANA Database Studio Auditor is not there. Obviously there can be other ways. You can think of a trigger as well, which we have already explained in probably the Oracle database video as well as the Microsoft SQL video. So trigger can be one of the way, or a PIM or SIM tool can be another way where you can achieve the audit at a database level. But if I talk about traditional auditing in the databases, if the audit policy is blank, that means the audit rule is not in place. But let's say if you find an audit policy, what are the columns, what are the things which you need to look as an auditor, so that we are going to explain. Okay, so the first is obviously the policy status. As you can see, this has to be enabled. That only means the audit policy is active. Second is the audit action. So what kind of commands you want to audit. So the DML command, that's an insert of the delete, you need to take into consideration, and to some extent DDL commands also need to be taken into considerations because it will involve, let's say, a drop table, you are deleting a table, or alter a table to some extent. Right now, as you can see from this UI window, if you just zoom a little bit, there is a 3 horizontal dots, right? If you click on this, you will be seeing this pop-up where you can get what kind of exact commands which has been configured in the audit policy, right? The next one is the audit action. So as I mentioned earlier, you can have 3 options, either to log the successful commands or the unsuccessful commands, or both, right? So in this case it has been set to all. This can be okay, or even if you audit only successful commands, that will be also okay. Audit level you can ignore. The next 2 are very important. As I mentioned earlier, in audit policy you need to configure which kind of users you want to audit, right? Now again, similar to this, if you click on this 3 triple dots, you will get a more detailed pop-up saying that what kind of users you have audited. Now there can be 2 ways or 2 approaches when you are setting up the audit policy for a specific user. Okay, let's say for example, in SAP HANA database, there is a specific user, we call it as a schema user. Okay, now what this schema user is, basically it's agent or intermediary user between the application layer as well as the database layer. So let's say for example, if a end user is passing an accounting document, right, what eventually he's doing is that he's pushing the data to that schema ID, and the schema ID is putting the data of that accounting document in, let's say, BKPF table or the BSEC table, that the header and line items for the accounting document in the database table, right? Now, if you enable this audit logs for the schema user, right, there will be a lot of logs, because indirectly you're enabling the auditor letter application layer, because the schema ID is connecting from application to database and putting the entries in the database on behalf of the end users thousands or a million times in a day, right? So a lot of organizations don't enable the audit logs for the schema user. So in that case, they will select something like this. They will enable it for all users, but they will exclude some users. So you can do that as well. Or let's say for example, there are only specific users you want to audit, you can specify only that user as well. So it can happen both the ways, right? And the last one is the target object. Again, very, very important, because a database will have, let's say, thousands or 10,000s of the tables. Now audit trail needs to be enabled for all the tables, probably depends, but as per the rule 11G, what are the books of accounts which are impacting, you need to enable it for those tables. So here also it is very imperative that your object type has to be table, and what are the target objects you are looking to capture in the audit policy. Now I usually don't go for this kind of window for further analysis, because there is a specific query I have given in the next screen, which you can just run. This is the table called as audit underscore policy, and you just need to give the name of the audit policy which you have seen. This gives a better output in an Excel, and it has one very crucial parameter which you cannot see from this screen. I will come to that in a second. So once you run this query, I have a sample output which will just open. Okay, this is the sample output. Now the things we need to take into consideration, there are lots of columns in it. So the first one is obviously we need to filter on the active audit policy or the in-scope audit policy, which we have already applied the filter when querying the databases. Now the next point is that is the audit policy active. This has to be true, so that we seen in the front end window as well. The next very important column is an event action. So for this, the DML commands, as I mentioned earlier, as well as to some extent the DDL commands has to be taken into consideration. So this kind of actions will be present in this column. Then the username, as I mentioned earlier, there are two ways you can in-scope the users, either for a specific user, or you can mention all the users except this. Now when you're mentioning all the users, it is very imperative that, see, take an example in a database. Let's say there are 10 user IDs, right, and you want to enable it for, let's say, 8 users. So in that case, you are going to specify the 8 users, and those 8 users will coming under this column, right? Now tomorrow, if some database administrator, just to bypass this kind of audit policy, create a new user, right, and give all the admin privileges to that user and perform a DML commands, right, in that case this audit policy will not capture the audit logs, right? So for that, the best practice is that you enable it for all the users. So tomorrow, if someone create a database user ID, that will be also in scope. And what are the IDs you want to exclude, you can put it in an exception list, which is in this case, which you can see the username is blank because we are enabling for the all users, but we have excluded some of the users, right? Now, will there be any reporting in case where it has been excluded, the users are excluded? That will come at the end, because you will see most of the scenarios the schema user is always excluded. So we'll come to that at the end of this video. Will there be any reporting in case the schema user is excluded? So this is the users. Next, there are two columns which are very important. Again, object type has to be table. There can be n number of objects. It can be a view, procedure, but for us we need to scope in, or we need to look into the tables forming part of the books of accounts. So object table has to be the table, and whenever the object name is appearing, that is nothing but the name of the table, right? And there is a last column. You see the last column is retention period. Very important. In this case, if you see, the retention period has been set to 30 days. So that means whatever the audit logs, let's say today is 10th May 2026, maximum oldest logs will be available for the 10th April 2026. Now, if this has been set to 30, what any integer values, the audit policy will keep the log for that days. By default, it will be always a blank. You will see a question mark similar to this column which we saw. So that means the audit logs are kept for the indefinite period. But this retention period parameter, if you see, this was not something which we could see from the front end, right? There is no column as well as retention. So that is the reason I prefer this query over the front end analysis, because it gives more clarity in terms of the number of the users which are in scope excluded, number of the tables, and obviously the retention period. So a very important part when we are inspecting the audit policy and what are the actions and how it has been configured. Now, once you're okay with the audit policy, right, the next question you will ask me, this audit policy has been created, right? It can be created, it can be enabled, it can be dropped, deletion of the audit policy, it can be disabled. How you will, know? Because again, we need to report on a tampering. So tampering can happen of the audit whenever you are, let's say for example, disabling the global audit parameter. So that we already saw that in one of the table, it captures the old value and new value. But even if you disable or drop the audit policy, it will result in tampering. So by default, SAP Hana Database, has this mandatory audit policy which captures certain actions. So what are the actions? So create audit policy, that is the creation of audit policy. Enable audit policy, enablement of the audit policy. Disable audit policy, that is disabling of audit policy. Drop is nothing but the deletion of audit policy. Even if you purge the audit logs, the clear audit log action will be captured. And if you are changing the audit configuration, so the global audit parameter from enable to disable, that is also getting captured. Apart from these 6 actions, there are 2 actions as well. So let's say if you try to execute a delete command on the audit logs, right? You are deleting the audit logs, that is also getting captured. And even if you are changing the auditor target from, let's say, CSV to database or vice versa, or database to sys logs, that action is also captured in mandatory audit policy. Now, this is very important. See, as I mentioned earlier, there can be 3 targets. One is the database, second one is the CSV, and third one is the sys log, right? Database will store in audit_log, CSV will store on a specified directory in CSV format, and sys log is nothing but stored in a OS directory, right? Now, whenever you are running this query, if you, let's say for example, you are running this query, select star from audit_log, right, where audit policy is mandatory audit policy, you are here assuming that auditor target has been set to database because you are querying the audit_log. So it is very important that, let's say for example, my auditor target is set to CSV. I cannot use this query because I am indirectly querying the audit_log, which is supposed to be empty because my data audit log is sitting in some other directory, CSV format in OS. So this query will applicable only in this case of the first scenario where it has been set to database. Now you will ask me, okay, let's just go through this sample output, and then we will come back to the CSV and OS as well. So this is a sample output of the mandatory audit policy if it has been set to database. The first thing you need to take into consideration is probably apply the filter to DML data audit policy where the in-scope audit policy, and as you can see here, the date timestamp is there and what are the actions which which might result in tampering. You can capture also, you can see the statements which has been actually passed. So this is a very important I would say feature of a SAP HANA database today, because I remember in Oracle when we saw in unified auditing, it does capture some of the mandatory audit logs. In Microsoft SQL by default it doesn't capture. You need to add audit_group as something as an action. So in SAP HANA database it is by default, so you don't need to worry about it. Now, as I mentioned here, let's say the scenario number 2 is where the auditor target has been set to CSV, right? Now in this scenario, you cannot query the audit_log table, right? So what you need to do is that you need to go to that configured directory which we saw in the first screenshot at a OS level. This directory, you need to go to that directory and you need to check for the audit log. So usually in case of the CSV, the .csv file follows a nomenclature. So let me just zoom a little bit. If you see here, the cat command is used to read the audit logs or a directory or a file. So index server underscore is a prefix. Now this is nothing but your name of the databases, 3003 dot auditor underscore csv. So it will follow a similar nomenclature, index servers underscore name of the databases dot 3003 dot audit underscore trail dot csv. Right now, since we are in the mandatory audit policy step, what we need to do is that we need to apply a filter, right? Because the audit.csv file has multiple logs, and one of the logs we need to look at is the mandatory audit policy. So this, whenever you're applying a grep, yeah, this is a very consistent too. So we need to check into consideration. So we have applied a grep filter and then mandatory audit policy, and as a result, if you see, there are some mandatory audit policy logs which we have seen from the csv audit logs files. And if, let's say for example, it has been set to syslog, right? Similar to CSV file, it will be stored on OS. I didn't get any kind of screenshot as such, but from the cloud I did find some of the paths. So in case of Red Hat and CentOS, it is stored in this. In case of SUSE, it's stored in this path, and Ubuntu it's stored in this path. So you can ask the client the directory where it is getting stored, and go to the directory, use the cat command to read the file and apply for the mandatory audit policy as a keyword. Make sure it is case sensitive. So from this you will get the idea when the audit policies are changed or created. So it kind of helps you in both the ways, in terms of the tampering of the audit trail, which we need to report. Also, if in case the audit trail has been enabled during the audit period, you need to take into consideration. Okay, now let's move to the next step, which is the step 5. How do we verify the audit logs? Again, this will depend upon the scenarios. There are 3 scenarios. The first scenario is where you have kept the auditor targeted database. So there are a few queries you can take into consideration. So we are here querying the audit underscore log table. So the first query will give you what are the oldest date and what is the maximum date. So from this you will get an idea that what are the oldest audit log available and what is the latest audit log available. If you want to query for a particular date for a DML command, you can apply this query where we have applied a date filter which you need to change, and the insert update delete will be the DML command to check the audit logs for the DML commands. If you want to give any kind of range, you can give that as well and use this query. I have, I think so, attached a sample screenshot where you can see the audit log. So let me just open quickly this file and we will go through this file. So in terms of the audit trail, the date and timestamp is something which we look for, so that is available. That's the first column. We can see the date and timestamp. Second one is the user, right? So username is the column K, which is the the database user. Now as you can see here, there is only one user because this is schema users. As I mentioned earlier, schema user is nothing but the user which connects from app to DB through the it's a connector or integration ID. Now you will ask me, where is the statement, Sanket? So let's go to the right side. You can see here the statement. So these are nothing but the, how can I say, the statement which the schema ID is telling the database or doing passing the statements to the database on behalf of the front end actions taken by the end users. I think so. These are something we look from the audit logs perspective. We can now move to the scenario number 2. Scenario number 2, it has been set to CSV. So we, as I mentioned earlier, we can't query audit underscore log. So we need to go to the particular configure directory and look for the CSV files, and you can use the cat command. So as you can see here, there is this CSV file. You can see there is another file because in this particular scenario there was a migration. So as a result, there are 2 audit logs. So you can use the cat command to read the audit logs and check the logs for the activity done through database. Syslogs, similar to CSV file, it is stored on an OS path. And since I didn't get any kind of screenshot, the similar screenshots like the path where for the different Linux systems which you have mentioned, so you can follow the same approach in case of syslog. See, majority of the time we are scoping the tenant database only, right? And in tenant databases, the default option is database. So I'm assuming in most of the cases you will find a database. But let's say if it is something which has been configured on a CSV and OS as well, it can be possible. Because see, ideal scenario, if you are enabling the auditor, at a database level, you don't want to flood the database with that kind of storage, right? So you want to keep their audit logs outside the database. just to probably doing the load balancing and all. So for that, in that scenario, ideal scenario is that you should be keeping the logs outside the database, probably using the syslog or the CSV format targets. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there is a chance that in your case the audit trail, all checks are done. If the global auditing parameter has been enabled, there has been no changes in that global audit parameter. Audit policy has been set, it is specified for all the relevant DML as well as detailed commands, retention period is okay. But when it comes to users, it has been enabled for all the users except schema user, right? Now, in this scenario, see, we need to understand the fact that even though the schema user is used by application, even though the SAP doesn't recommend it to manually log in and pass the database, see, most of the scenarios, SAP doesn't even recommend and client doesn't even perform the DML commands backend, through the database, right? But auditor living of factual reporting, we cannot justify that. We need to say whether it is there or not, right? So, if I ask a question, see, through schema ID, one can manually log in and pass the DML commands from the backend, right? Now, if I ask a questions, is the audit log for the schema user is enabled? The answer is no, right? So in this scenario, we need to report it accordingly. It is probably not enabled for one user, something like that, right? But if you want to check whether there has been manual logins or not, right, through the schema ID during audit period, there is a table called as m_connection which keeps the login info. But there is a very, I would say, huge limitation for this. See, you need to understand that schema user is connecting from app to DB 1,000 times in a day or 1,000,000 times in a day. Alright, now if I keep the logs for 1 year in m_connection, it's going to flood the database, right? So there are two parameters which kind of controls how the retention data for the m_connections. So first one is the connection history lifetime, which says that the default value is 60, that means 60 minutes. So I will get the data for m_connection for last 1 hour only, right? For last 1 hour, whatever the connections which has been happened through SAP databases, probably through schema ID, I will get that. And there is another parameter, connection_history_maximum size. The default parameter is 1 lakh. I tried to get some R&D for 1 lakh. I didn't get the unit. Is it a 1 lakh line items? It is 1 lakh KB, MB. I'm not really sure on this, but looking at the parameter, it says the maximum size. If you look at the Microsoft SQL video, there was similar parameter called as size, and when we did that video, when it refers to the size of the file, right? So it can be a 1 lakh line items, or it can be something in the case of KBs or MB. But if you have any idea about this maximum size, what it stands for, do let me know in the comment sections. So there are these two parameters which control the m_connection. So and if you query this, you won't be able to get the data for the whole year, right? So probably client needs to change this parameter, or probably they need to schedule some kind of automation which probably for every hour runs and probably store this file in a different directory, right? And from that we can probably conclude that whether there have been any manual logins through the schema ID or not. But it's a very rare situations because I mean, most of the scenario you won't find audit enabled, and even if it is enabled, probably it has been enabled. Audit policy is not there. It is enabled not for all the users, not for all the tables, not for all the DML or relevant detail commands. Yeah. In this, just for the information purpose, in this m_connections table, there is a column called as connection ID. So if the connection ID is positive, it means it's an active connection. If it is negative, that means it's an historical connection. Yeah, I think that's it for the SAP HANA Database audit trail as per the Rule 11G requirement. I tried to cover all the aspects which we need to check as per the auditor. Didn't got the SAP HANA Database access because it's a closed source. Yeah, I think so. This probably will be helpful to you guys. If you have any questions, do let me know in the comment. And yeah, thank you so much. Have a good day. Bye bye.